Welcome back to Carneades.org. Today we're going to be finishing up our series in debunking the modal ontological argument 6 ways from Sunday. This is going to be the final video in this series where we are going to offer objection number 36. It's objection 36 because 6 times 6, I was feeling very 6 when I made this series of videos. So, this is going to be Saturday, the anti-modal ontological argument against the existence of God, or rather, against the ontological argument. Once again, I'm not necessarily against God in this series of videos. I'm more against a bad argument for the existence of God. The modal ontological argument is my target more than God's existence. And in fact, as I will show in this series, having this as a tool is in fact going to be more detrimental to the theist than it will be helpful. Let's take a look at why. So, before we offer this argument, I want you to think of the following thought experiment and keep it in your mind throughout the argument. One pill is poison, the other is not. I have a test that will show you if a pill is poison or not. We run the test on the first pill, and it shows it's not poison. We run the test on the second pill and we show it is not poison. Either I was lying and neither pill is poisonous, or the test is unable to tell if a pill is poisonous or not. This may seem to have nothing to do with the modal ontological argument right now, but we'll revisit it at the end. Just have it in your mind while you're thinking about these arguments. So, we're going to move back to the original modal ontological argument that was offered in the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, because this argument is going to be what the Inspiring Philosophy one reduces to, as I've shown, and going to be more representative of all modal ontological arguments. It goes, it is possible that Ed, a necessary all-powerful evil deceiver, exists. Ed is not contingent. Either it's not possible to exist or exists necessarily. Therefore, Ed exists. Whoops! That wasn't the modal ontological argument for God. That was the modal ontological argument for an evil deceiver. It uses the whole same process as the modal ontological argument, but it has a different target. It's saying that an evil deceiver exists. However, this is something of a problem. It is possible that Ed, a necessary all-powerful evil deceiver, exists. Ed is not contingent. Either it's not possible he exists or exists necessarily. Therefore, Ed exists. It is possible that God, a necessary all-powerful good being, exists. God is not contingent. Either it's not possible he exists or exists necessarily. Therefore, God exists. We've just run the ontological argument twice, once with Ed and once with God. Both God and Ed cannot exist. It should be clear why this is the case. If there is an all-powerful evil being and an all-powerful good being, our definition of all-powerful is going to be really, really confusing. Ed exists and God exists. That's just from 3 and 6. Therefore, God and Ed both do and do not exist. This, of course, is a contradiction. So we have to deny something we have in these premises. The atheist will say that we should just throw out the ontological argument, because that system of argument is what has led us here. The theist will probably say, well, there's a problem with our conception of Ed being plugged into that first set of premises. Let's take a look. So maybe the theist will say that premise 1 is not the case, because something that is evil cannot exist necessarily. Well, something that is evil cannot exist necessarily. I'm a little skeptical of this. Objection 36.1. What rule of logic states this? I'm curious. It seems that morality, the things dealing with good and evil, is a very separate area of philosophy from modality, dealing with necessity and possibility. Show me why these overlap in this way. 36.2. How do you define evil before you've proven God? I'm a little worried. A lot of theists just say that good and evil are things that God says, or God is just good and evil. So, before you've proven God, how do you understand what good and evil are? Seems to be circular reasoning. 36.3. One might argue that existence itself is evil. It involves much suffering. Therefore, existence is something that is necessary, and is existence something that is evil. So, something that is evil exists necessarily, that thing being existence. But, in order to give the theist everything they want, and be as charitable as possible to them, we'll try another argument on for size. It is possible that DNG, a necessary, all-powerful, do-nothing God, exists. A God that has all the qualities of God, but in fact does nothing. DNG is not contingent. Either it's not possible that he exists, or he exists necessarily. Therefore, DNG exists. As with Ed, we can run the ontological argument to show that DNG exists, as well as the ontological argument to show that God exists. However, similar to Ed, God and DNG cannot exist. Once again, omnipotence is going to be problematic, and so on. However, we've just shown that both DNG and God exist. Therefore, God and DNG both do and do not exist. We've once again run into a contradiction. Now, we could, again, just throw out the ontological argument as a way to understand truth. Or we could try to go in and show that DNG is not the kind of thing we can plug into the ontological argument. So, both God and DNG cannot exist. To object to this, we would say God and DNG could coexist. Well, omnipotence doesn't really seem to be possible. Even if DNG does not, as a fact of the matter, do anything, that doesn't seem to mean that he couldn't do anything. So I'm still confused, 36.4, that what is omnipotence? 36.5, being the first being seems to be impossible, and neither of them could have created the other because they both existed for all time, and so it seems a lot of their properties that they would have to be the most powerful being or the maximally great being don't seem to really apply or don't seem to be able to be properties that they have. 36.6. You might also say that we could object to the first premise. It's possible that DNG, a necessary all-powerful do-nothing God, exists, saying that only maximally great beings can exist necessarily. I'm a little worried about this, though, because there seem to be a lot of other kind of neutral things that exist necessarily. Logical truths don't seem to be good or bad, 36.61. The multiverse, just existence, doesn't seem to be necessarily good or bad, but exists necessarily. And 36.63, numbers, which are surely not good or evil, seem to be necessary beings. I don't know. Some theists may think the number 6 is pretty evil at the end of this video. So, just in case the theist is still concerned, I'm going to offer one final version of this argument that should, for good and for always, put down the modal ontological argument for the existence of God. It is possible that Yahweh, a necessary all-powerful God that believes you should not eat pork, but is otherwise identical to God, exists. In this case, we're saying that God is identical to Yahweh, but believes you should eat pork. Yahweh is not contingent. Either it is not possible that he exists or he exists necessarily. Therefore, Yahweh exists. It is important to note, Yahweh is a maximally great being. He's all good, all powerful, all knowing, necessary in the same way that God is. However, Yahweh has different properties. And as he has different properties than God, he cannot be the same thing as God. He's a separate entity. Once again, we can run the argument. It is possible that Yahweh, a necessary, all-powerful God that believes you should not eat pork but is otherwise identical to God, exists. Yahweh is not contingent, either is not possible he exists or exists necessarily, therefore Yahweh exists. It is possible that God, a necessary, all-powerful good being, exists. God is not contingent, either is not possible he exists or exists necessarily. Therefore God exists. Once again, both God and Yahweh cannot both exist, but Yahweh exists and God exists. Therefore, we are left once again with a contradiction. God and Yahweh both do and do not exist. This is a contradiction. And it should be very, very clear that Yahweh and God are basically the same thing. There's no way the theist can get in and try to parse the distinction between that. They are equivalent in every measure except one. And it is simply going to be begging the question, or assuming you are right, to say that one of those exists and the other does not. Our only hope here is to either claim that they can coexist, or to claim that, in fact, the modal ontological argument is not a way to find truth in the world. We could deny both God and Yahweh cannot exist and say that God and Yahweh could coexist. Once again, omnipotence is going to be impossible, 36.64. They cannot both have created the universe. One of them must have. And goodness implies a contradiction by definition. One of them says one thing is good, one of them says another thing is good. Goodness is itself a contradiction. 36.66. I will bring us back to our original thought experiment. One pill is poison, the other is not. I have a test that will show you if a pill is poison or not. We run the test on the first pill. Shows it's not poison. We run the test on the second pill. It shows it's not poison. Either I was lying and neither pill is poisonous, or the test cannot tell whether or not a pill is poisonous. Think of this in the context of the ontological argument. One God exists and the other does not. God and Yoalla. I have a test, I have an argument that will show if God exists or not. That's what the modal ontological argument claims to do. It claims to show that God exists, or show that he doesn't. It, however, does show that God exists, and it shows that Yoalla exists. Either both gods can in fact exist, that they have somehow conflicting wills, and in fact many more gods would exist if this were the case. Or the argument itself cannot show whether or not a god exists. It seems the only logical conclusion that we can come to is to deny that the ontological argument is a way for us to see truth. Here's the argument. The modal ontological argument can provide truth, assumed indirect proof. If the modal ontological argument can provide truth, then both God and Yoalla exist. See the modal ontological argument earlier. Both God and Yoalla exist. 1, 2, modus ponens. Both God and Yoalla cannot exist. That's just the definition of God. God and Yoalla both exist and do not exist. We are left with a contradiction, which means that, therefore, the modal ontological argument cannot provide truth. 1 through 5, indirect proof. If that was unconvincing to you, I suggest you watch the rest of my videos, because I offer over 36 objections to this argument. While it is quite a industrious try, it is not going to be a valid argument. It is not going to be an argument that will provide us with truth. And it should not and should never be convincing to anyone. There are many arguments for God that are interesting out there, that provide us with fantastic questions. The modal ontological argument is not one of them. It's invalid and painfully so. Please stop using it. It's just obnoxious. That was the modal ontological argument for the existence of God. Next up, we're going to be looking at the Meinonian ontological argument, the Mariological ontological argument, the religious experience ontological argument, and finally the higher order ontological argument. Watch this video and more at Carneades.org, and stay skeptical, everybody.